No one expected Canada, a nation known for peacekeeping, to unleash a stealth fighter jet that could blind radar before it's even seen. But when Ottawa made the announcement, Russian defense officials scrambled in fear. This wasn't just another new plane, it is a game changer. Advanced enough to jam enemy signals, fast enough to disappear, and smart enough to rewrite air combat itself. So how did Canada pull this off under everyone's nose? And why is Moscow suddenly treating its northern neighbor as a serious threat? Join us as we find out why Canada's brand new fighter jet has left Russia in a state of shock. The morning of March 28, 2022 changed everything for Russian military planners watching North America. Canada announced the F-35 Lightning II had won their fighter jet competition. Moscow's intelligence services had been tracking this decision for over 2 decades, expecting Canada to choose almost anything else. Russian analysts knew the F-35 as America's most advanced stealth fighter. The Pentagon uses these aircraft for suppression of enemy air defenses and deep strike missions. Canada's commitment to 88 of these jets meant its northern neighbor was about to deploy technology that could eliminate threats before appearing on radar screens. The timing caught everyone off guard. Justin Trudeau had campaigned against this exact aircraft in 2015. He promised voters Canada would pick cheaper options that better match their defense needs. The same fighter jet that Canadian media had called a national scandal just 10 years earlier was now heading to Canadian air bases. By December 2022, $7 billion was approved for the first 16 F-35As. The full $16 billion program represents the largest military purchase in Canadian history. Russia suddenly faced a neighbor equipped with the same stealth fighters that keep Chinese and Iranian air defenses awake at night. The F-35 brings capabilities that Russian engineers struggle to match. Its radar cross-section appears smaller than a metal golf ball to most detection systems. The aircraft carries weapons internally, eliminating the radar signatures that external missiles create on older fighters. Sensor fusion through 8.6 million lines of code gives pilots a complete picture of everything happening around them. Canadian F-35s will share data with American aircraft through encrypted links that enemy forces cannot intercept. This creates an intelligence network stretching across North America. Every Canadian jet becomes a sensor node feeding information to the broader defense system. The aircraft's stealth design focuses on high-frequency radar bands that most air defense systems use. Radar-absorbent materials and careful surface shaping make detection extremely difficult. The diverterless supersonic inlet eliminates cavities that typically reflect radar waves to enemy receivers. Russia's Arctic strategy suddenly looked much more complicated. Their weapons testing along northern borders and missile deployments near North American airspace had triggered exactly the response Moscow wanted to avoid. Canada was upgrading from Cold War-era CF-18 Hornets to 5th-generation stealth fighters. The CF-18 has served Canadian forces since 1982, flying missions over the Gulf, Kosovo, Libya, and against ISIS. These reliable workhorses will be replaced by aircraft that can penetrate advanced air defense systems without being detected. Canadian pilots will operate from bases spanning the world's longest international border with the United States. The 8,891-kilometer frontier becomes a defensive line protected by stealth technology that Russia cannot easily counter. The F-35 procurement signals Canada's evolution from peacekeeping missions to power projection capabilities. The Canadian Armed Forces now fields 68,000 active personnel supported by specialized intelligence, joint operations, and special forces commands. Their $29.3 billion defense budget ranks 16th globally. Moscow's planners must now account for Canadian F-35s patrolling Arctic approaches they considered vulnerable. The aircraft's ability to share targeting data while remaining invisible creates defensive coverage that extends far beyond traditional radar ranges. Russia miscalculated how its aggressive Arctic posture would reshape North American defense partnerships. However, behind this shocking announcement is a political disaster that has been brewing for over 2 decades, one that has toppled governments and nearly destroyed Canada's entire defense strategy. How did a routine military purchase become the most explosive political scandal in Canadian history? The F-35 saga began quietly in 1997 when Canada invested $10 million to become an informed partner in the Joint Strike Fighter project. By 2002, the commitment had grown to $150 million from the Department of National Defence and another $50 million from Industry Canada. Nobody expected this routine military procurement would become a political weapon that would bring down governments. The explosion came in 2010 when Prime Minister Stephen Harper's Conservative government announced plans to purchase 65 F-35s for $9 billion. The decision bypassed competitive bidding entirely through a sole-sourced, untendered contract with Lockheed Martin. Parliament erupted in fury over the lack of transparency and detailed cost breakdowns. The political firestorm reached nuclear levels when the government refused to provide detailed procurement costs to Parliament. Opposition parties accused the Conservatives of hiding the true expense from taxpayers. The controversy became so intense that Parliament found the government in contempt on March 25, 2011. This unprecedented finding triggered a non-confidence vote that brought down Harper's government entirely. The F-35 purchase became the central battleground of the 2011 federal election. Harper's Conservatives won a majority government despite the controversy, but the damage was already spreading through the defense establishment. Former Minister of National Defense Peter MacKay fought desperately to defend cost estimates that critics claimed were grossly inflated because they included pilot salaries and fuel costs never before factored into procurement budgets. The 2012 Auditor General report delivered the killing blow. The highly critical assessment labeled the entire F-35 program a national scandal and fiasco. Media outlets across Canada picked up the devastating language, turning the fighter jet into a symbol of government incompetence. Critics cited ineptitude piled upon ineptitude, bureaucracy, and inertia, driving a complete lack of progress on Canada's most important defense purchase. The political carnage was swift and brutal. The F-35 mysteriously vanished from the Harper government's 2012 federal budget, despite being announced as a priority just 2 years earlier. By 2015, the fighter jet had disappeared entirely from the Conservative Party election platform. The aircraft that was supposed to define Canadian air power had become political poison. Justin Trudeau seized the opportunity during the 2015 election campaign. The Liberal Party won a majority government partly on promises to reject the F-35 completely. Trudeau declared his government would select from many lower-priced options that better matched Canada's defense needs. The F-35 appeared dead in Canadian politics. But geopolitical reality has a way of crushing political promises. Russian aggression in Ukraine and growing Chinese threats in the Pacific forced Canada to reconsider its defense priorities. By 2019, a formal competition was launched that included the very aircraft Trudeau had sworn to avoid. The political earthquake that nearly destroyed the F-35 program had come full circle, proving that military necessity ultimately trumps political convenience. While Canadian politicians battled over fighter jets, Vladimir Putin was quietly executing his most ambitious Arctic plan, but what he didn't expect was how spectacularly it would backfire. Russian military strategists had been watching the melting Arctic ice with growing excitement. Climate change was opening shipping routes and resource extraction opportunities that had been frozen for centuries. Putin saw this as Russia's moment to dominate the top of the world, while Western nations focused on conflicts elsewhere. The Russian military began deploying advanced missile systems across its Arctic territories. These weren't defensive weapons. They were offensive platforms capable of striking targets across North America and Europe. Russian submarines started prowling beneath Arctic ice sheets, testing new underwater capabilities that could threaten shipping lanes in coastal cities. Moscow ramped up weapons testing along Arctic borders, sending clear signals that it considered this region its sphere of influence. Russian aircraft began probing the edges of North American airspace with increasing frequency. Each flight tested response times and defensive capabilities while demonstrating Russia's growing Arctic presence. Putin's strategy seemed brilliant on paper. Russia has the longest Arctic coastline of any nation. Their nuclear-powered icebreakers could operate year-round in conditions that stopped other countries' vessels. The Kremlin believed Western nations lacked the political will and military infrastructure to challenge Russian Arctic expansion. But Putin had made a critical miscalculation. His aggressive Arctic posture triggered exactly the response Moscow wanted to avoid: a unified North American defense partnership that would turn Russia's perceived advantage into a strategic nightmare. Canada's counter-response caught Russian planners completely off guard. The Canadian government unveiled a comprehensive 37-page Arctic security policy that detailed plans Moscow hadn't anticipated. Canada announced new consulates in Anchorage, Alaska, and Nuuk, Greenland, creating diplomatic outposts that could coordinate regional activities. The appointment of a dedicated Arctic ambassador sent another clear message that Canada was taking northern security seriously. This wasn't just symbolic. The ambassador would coordinate policies and actions across multiple government departments and international partners. Canada moved to resolve long-standing boundary disputes that had limited effective Arctic cooperation. Negotiations with the United States over the Beaufort Sea boundary and settlement of the Hans Island dispute with Denmark removed obstacles to coordinated defense planning. The real masterstroke was Canada's decision to actively involve Indigenous communities in Arctic surveillance and defense activities. The Inuit, Sami, and Chukchi peoples had inhabited these lands for thousands of years. Their knowledge of Arctic conditions, weather patterns, and terrain features provided intelligence advantages that no satellite system could match. Military enhancements followed quickly. Canada announced plans for new patrol ships specifically designed for Arctic operations. Navy destroyers would extend their operational range into northern waters. Advanced icebreakers would maintain year-round access to strategic waterways. The deployment of submarines capable of operating beneath ice sheets particularly concerned Russian naval commanders. These vessels could track Russian submarine movements and challenge their underwater dominance in Arctic waters. Additional aircraft and drone deployments created a surveillance network that could monitor Russian activities across vast Arctic distances. When combined with expanding cooperation with Japan, South Korea, and Nordic NATO members, Canada had essentially created an Arctic monitoring system that turned Russia's expansion into a carefully watched and potentially contained operation. Putin's bold Arctic gambit had backfired spectacularly, transforming a perceived Russian advantage into a coordinated Western response that challenged Moscow's northern ambitions at every turn. The technology inside Canada's new fighter jet represents something far beyond traditional aircraft, a breakthrough so advanced that it essentially functions as a flying supercomputer. But what makes this technological leap so terrifying to Russian military planners? The Lockheed Martin F-35. Lightning II isn't just an aircraft with computers installed. It's a computer that happens to fly. The distinction matters more than most people realize. Traditional fighter jets rely on pilots to process information from separate systems and make decisions based on limited data. The F-35 flips this concept entirely by becoming the processor itself. 8.6 million lines of code run continuously throughout every flight mission. This software handles everything from basic flight controls to advanced threat detection and targeting calculations. The Green Hills Software Integrity Real-Time Operating System coordinates multiple processors that work faster than human reflexes can follow. The aircraft's sensor fusion capability represents the biggest breakthrough in military aviation since the invention of radar. Multiple detection systems feed information into a central processing unit that creates a complete three-dimensional picture of everything happening within hundreds of miles. The pilot sees threats, friendly forces, terrain features, and weather conditions displayed as a single integrated image. The Northrop Grumman AN/APG-81-81 radar system can track multiple targets simultaneously at ranges exceeding 80 nautical miles. Unlike older radars that scan back and forth mechanically, this electronically scanned array can focus its beam in multiple directions almost instantly. The radar also functions as part of the electronic warfare system, jamming enemy communications while gathering intelligence. 6 infrared sensors positioned around the aircraft create the AN/AAQ-37 distributed aperture system. These sensors provide complete spherical coverage around the F-35, detecting missile launches and aircraft movements from any direction. The system projects this information directly onto the pilot's helmet visor, creating night vision and threat awareness that covers every angle simultaneously. The AN/ASQ-239 Barracuda electronic warfare system embeds 10 radio frequency antennas into the aircraft's wings and tail surfaces. These antennas can detect enemy radar signals, determine their location, and jam their transmissions without revealing the F-35's position. The system identifies threats and responds to them faster than traditional electronic warfare equipment. Everything connects through data networks that use IEEE 1394B and fiber channel buses to share information between systems. The aircraft essentially becomes a flying network node that can communicate with other F-35s, ground stations, and naval vessels through encrypted links that enemy forces cannot intercept. The multifunction advanced data link allows multiple F-35s to share targeting information while maintaining complete stealth. One aircraft can detect a threat and immediately transmit its location to other F-35s in the area without using radio communications that enemies might detect. This creates a distributed intelligence network where each aircraft becomes more effective when operating with others. Canadian F-35s will integrate with existing Link 16 communication systems used by NATO forces. This backward compatibility means the advanced Canadian aircraft can coordinate with older American, British, and European military systems during joint operations. The aircraft weighs 29,300 pounds empty, with much of that weight coming from the extensive computer systems and internal weapons bays. 50 pounds of samarium magnets power the various electronic systems that keep the flying computer operational during high-stress combat maneuvers. Russian engineers studying the F-35's capabilities face a fundamental problem. Their aircraft design philosophy focuses on mechanical performance and pilot skill. The F-35 represents a completely different approach, where software and sensors matter more than traditional flying abilities. When 88 of these flying computers join the Royal Canadian Air Force, they create an intelligence network that can detect and track Russian military activities across vast distances while remaining essentially invisible to traditional detection methods. This technological superiority represents more than just advanced aircraft. It signals Canada's complete transformation from a quiet peacekeeping nation into a global military power. How did this dramatic shift catch the world so off guard? The transformation didn't happen overnight, but the scale of change has stunned international observers who still picture Canada as a friendly neighbor focused on humanitarian missions. The Canadian Armed Forces now operate as a unified military structure with 68,000 active personnel and 27,000 reserves, supported by 5,000 Canadian Rangers who provide specialized knowledge of remote territories. Canada's military budget reaches $29.3 billion annually, representing 1.3% of the nation's gross domestic product. This spending level ranks Canada 16th globally for defense expenditure, placing it ahead of many countries with larger populations and more obvious security threats. The constitutional structure gives Canada's military unique authority. King Charles III serves as Commander-in-Chief, with the Governor-General representing royal authority over Canadian forces. This arrangement provides political stability and clear command structures that many other democracies lack. Canada's military evolution began shifting dramatically after the Cold War ended. The nation had built its international reputation through United Nations peacekeeping missions throughout the 20th century. Canadian forces wore blue helmets and served as neutral observers in conflicts from Cyprus to the Middle East. But modern conflicts demanded different capabilities. Canada found itself reluctant to participate in military operations that lacked United Nations approval, including the Vietnam War and the 2003 invasion of Iraq. This principled stance earned international respect but limited Canada's ability to support key allies during critical moments. The 21st century brought fundamental changes to Canadian military thinking. Direct participation in United Nations peacekeeping efforts declined sharply as the government reallocated military resources toward North Atlantic Treaty Organization operations that offered more strategic flexibility. The McDonnell Douglas CF-18 Hornet became the symbol of Canada's military modernization. Officially designated CF-188, these aircraft replaced the aging CF-104 Starfighter, CF-101 Voodoo, and CF-116 Freedom Fighter starting in 1982. CF-18 aircraft proved their combat effectiveness across multiple theaters. They supported North American Aerospace Defense Command air sovereignty patrols over Canadian territory while participating in actual combat operations during the Gulf War in 1991. The aircraft performed strike missions during the Kosovo conflict in the late 1990s. More recent operations demonstrated Canada's growing willingness to project military power internationally. CF-18 enforced the no-fly zone over Libya in 2011 as part of international efforts to protect civilian populations. The aircraft also participated in Operation Impact, Canada's contribution to the military campaign against the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. These combat deployments revealed both the capabilities and limitations of Canada's existing military structure. The CF-18 fleet, while reliable and battle-tested, represented technology from the 1970s and 80s. Maintaining aging aircraft became increasingly expensive, while their effectiveness against modern air defense systems declined. Canada's military now operates specialized commands that reflect its expanded global role. Canadian Forces Intelligence Command handles information gathering and analysis. Canadian Joint Operations Command coordinates multi-service missions. Canadian Special Operations Forces Command manages elite units trained for high-risk operations. The transformation extends beyond equipment and organization to fundamental military philosophy. Canada's $29.3 billion defense investment supports research and development programs that keep pace with technological advances. The nation ranked 16th in the Global Innovation Index by 2021, reflecting a sustained commitment to military modernization. The F-35 procurement represents the culmination of this military evolution. Canada chose the most advanced fighter aircraft available rather than settling for cheaper alternatives that might save money but compromise capabilities. This decision signals Canada's recognition that modern military effectiveness requires technological superiority rather than just good intentions and diplomatic skills. Russian and Chinese military analysts studying Canadian defense policies must now account for a nation capable of projecting significant military power across global distances while maintaining the political stability and alliance relationships that make such power projection strategically effective. Thanks for watching. While you are still here, click on the link on your screen to check out another of our videos. See you there.